Hello, good morning, and welcome to Module 2. I am doing a transcript that I will host because I know we have some students that may be helpful to have that transcription, but I have noticed that my Indiana accent at times comes out in that transcription. So hopefully you can understand what I'm saying or else read what I'm saying. So today we're going to start Module 2, and I'm going to go over some information. I want to explain assignments, but I also want to talk to you a little bit about what you're going to be learning, provide a little bit more information. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to share my screen with you so that you can see what you're going to be doing this week. So here we go. We are always going to start at, let's look at the Learn section. This tells us what you're going to be reading. So this week you have some articles here. You have Discovering the Literacy Gap, which I actually printed out because it helps me as I'm reading it. You have Interdisciplinary Theoretical Foundations and a copy of Theories of Research on Oral Language Fluency. So this module is all about literacy theoretical framework and what is the theoretical framework behind various interventions. So I know that we have a lot of different backgrounds of people in here, so I want you to understand what is that theoretical underpinning of certain strategies that you're doing. And that's the purpose that we're of this particular module. So you have 3 different theories, or 3 different articles, I should say, that you're going to be reading. You also have some videos. And these videos represent specific literacy theory models. So that's why you have the video. We're showing you the video because in Module 2, in this module, you're going to write a 2 to 3 page theoretical framework, which I'm going to be talking more about in a minute. But you're going to write your theoretical framework. And then in Module 3, you're going to develop and teach a lesson, video record it, that aligns with that theory that you wrote about in 2. So that's kind of the progression here. So you have 3 articles to read and you have some videos to watch about your theoretical, how to develop that. And there's a lot of supplementary materials also. So that's what you're going to be reading. You have your 3 articles to read. And you have 2 assignments. The first assignment is a discussion post, which after you have read these articles, you're going to write about how do theories support instructional practices. So in other words, why have a theoretical framework for what you're doing? Identify and summarize the theory you have chosen to ground your literacy lesson in for number 3, for module 3. Identify the theorist or theorists who are associated with that theory. So you'll need to do that. And then explain the application of the theory that you're going to be doing in Module 3. That's a discussion. Your assignment this week, you have to write a 2 to 3 page paper explaining the theoretical framework that you are going to be doing in Module 3. Sorry about that. So you'll be defining the literacy needs. So let's say that you are doing comprehension lesson. Then you would need to explain the literacy theory behind that. And then you're going to be teaching that lesson. But your theoretical framework, this paper is, like I said, a 2 to 3 page paper that does not count the title or the references. And in that, you're going to explain that theory. I'm going to go here to the rubric. So, okay, so actually the rubric that is on here is not updated. So I'll make sure I send you that you have the correct rubric when we, before I grade it. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of the information in you're reading today. So here we go. Sorry, it's going to take me a second. Oh, sorry. I think here's the rubric. There we go. Okay. I was able to find the rubric. So here we go. So here is the rubric for your theoretical framework paper. It's worth 100 points. 60 of those points are the content. So you need to define and identify the literacy need. So let's say the literacy need is phonics. What are the key concepts of the literacy topic? You need to identify that. So if you were doing phonics, you might say, I'm going to do segmenting and blending of phonemes. The theory behind that needs to be summarized. Then you need to evaluate that theory in relationship to other theories to justify why you are agreeing with this particular theory. And then there needs to be a clear application between your theory and the instruction that you're going to be providing. I'll be looking at the structure of the paper. I'll be looking at grammar and mechanics, and then format. So we want, it should be an APA. And then research and sources. There should be a broad and thorough range of high quality research-based sources that explain your theoretical framework. Okay, so that's the rubric. Now, what I'd like to do now is talk to you a little bit about this particular topic of theories. So the first article, the first thing I want to ask you is, why do I need to know a theoretical framework? Why is that important? I know I've been a principal, I've worked with teachers a lot, and many times I hear teachers say, you know, I don't need to know all this theory, I just need to know what I'm supposed to do. Have you ever felt like that? Might be thinking that now. So why do you need why do you need to know the theory? Well, a theory, and I'm looking at in the article called Discovering the Literacy Gap, a systematic review of reading and writing. On page 2, it talks about that theory. We need a clear articulation of theory so that teachers will understand the why behind what they're doing. If you don't understand your theory, you're not understanding the why. As an educator, you need to understand, you need to be enthusiastic about what that strategy you're doing. I know for me, when I'm told to do something, I want to know why. I want to know the understanding and the reasoning behind it. The theoretical underpinning of a reading strategy or an intervention explains the phenomenon. So for example, if we're talking reading fluency, which one of your articles is related to reading fluency, what is the theoretical underpinnings to explain that things like repeated readings and reader's theater are good? How do you know that that's good? What's the theory behind that? That's what we're trying to explain. So you have an article called Interdisciplinary Theoretical Foundations for Teaching Reading. And it explains some of the major, sorry, I'm looking at my head over here because I want to make sure I'm right here. It explains some of the major theories in literacy. So for example, it explains linguistic theory of teaching. And linguistic theory supports the view that the reader and the writer uses a knowledge of structure of language. And so if that's a theoretical underpinning, linguistics, you're going to do a lot with orthographic reading. You're going to do a lot of knowledge of sound symbol correspondence. You're going to do a lot of a syntax because you believe that with reading, it all starts with that linguistic base in spoken language. We also have what we call the psycholinguistic theory. The psycholinguistic theory supports the view that a reader and a writer use cognitive functions of focus, engagement, and motivation. So A psycholinguistic theory really leads us into thinking about things like motivation and engagement. Okay, which that's important. We have cognitive theories. Now, this is very big right now, especially with the science of reading. Cognitive theories support the view that a reader and writer uh, has to have strategic, procedural workings in the brain in order to read. And so that cognitive theory is very important. It deals with things. It also deals with things like purpose and motivation, but it really gets into the physical, neurological functions of reading. And I'm just going through some of this. Sociolinguistic theory that has to do with the reader and the writer uses social and cultural knowledge and values to contribute to reading. I think in the past, we really relied a lot on this sociolinguistic theory. And we've said that we really need to think about the social and the cultural context. Is that important? Yeah, I think that's important. But if you don't teach explicit instruction and use cognitive theories and linguistic theories, students still can't read. Okay. Another theory we have is a critical theory. A critical theory has to do with evaluating functions and acting on and interacting with print as it reflects to what people would call relations of power and dominance. So critical theorists emphasize the individual and society. So it's a little bit more of a nebulous theory, and I think many schools have been going to this critical theory, and a lot of people are saying, again, we need to go back to that cognitive behavioral theory to teach kids that explicitly and systematically how to read. But this article talks a lot about interdisciplinary theory, which states that it's really everything, which sometimes that's kind of what it comes down to. So I wanted to share with you, this is from the Reading League. If you are not a member of the Reading League, it's a great organization that aligns everything they do with the science of reading. And so when you think about the science of reading is really just everything, this collective body of knowledge that we know about how students learn to read. And I'm going down here a little bit because I want you to see, it says the science of reading is derived from researchers in multiple fields. When you see these fields, you're going to notice it really does align with all of these different theories. We have cognitive psychology. Well, there is a cognitive theory of reading. Communication sciences, that has to do with that linguistic inquiry. Developmental psychology. Education, special education, linguistics, neuroscience, school psychology. It has to do with all of those things. And so when you look at the science of reading, we can't just take one part of it. We have to say, this is everything we know about how kids learn how to read. And it does talk about how the brain, so again, that goes back to the cognitive aspect of reading. So with the science of reading, we tend to be emphasizing a little bit more of that cognitive aspect of teaching. And then, of course, you guys have heard Scarborough's reading rope and the components of reading. But when you look at this, it really does, there's an interdisciplinary model of different theories. So what you need to think about today in the articles, you have one article that explains the interdisciplinary theories of reading. You have another article that is about fluency and the theoretical underpinnings of fluency. And in another article, it's a systematic review of reading and writing theory. So the theory behind the connection of reading and writing. So as you're reading these articles, I would take some notes and maybe create a little chart where you have the theory and what the theory means. And again, you're going to have your theoretical framework. So the point of module 2 is what's that theoretical framework, explaining it, and then and a lot of that may depend on where you teach too and what you teach, right? If you're teaching kindergartners in small groups, it's going to be a little bit different. And so, what you teach and how you teach, it's going to impact the theory, the theoretical base behind the intervention. And then you'll be teaching that on Wednesday. Okay, it is a little bit of deep reading today, but I'd encourage you to take some time and think about it because, again, the whole purpose of developing a theoretical framework is understanding the why behind what you're doing. Where does um, the basis for this intervention? What is the basis of it? Because if you really don't have a theoretical understanding, how do you know if what you're doing is correct or not? Remember what we learned in um, uh, module 1. Just because it's research based doesn't mean that it is grounded in a theoretical, a literacy theory that makes sense. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know, but that's it for module 2. Sorry, it's taken me a minute to, bye-bye.